This show is part of the Proclaim Podcast Network, thoughtfully crafted, faithfully told stories that proclaim His name. More at proclaim.fm.
This episode contains descriptions of drug abuse and may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised. I'm Paul Hastings, and you're listening to Compelled, where we use gripping, immersive storytelling to bring to life Christian testimonies from the kingdom of God, told by the people compelled to live for Him. It's hard to believe that this is episode number 99, and to celebrate our 100th episode, we've got some big news at the end of today's story. So please make sure to listen after today's episode. Recently, we heard from Tom Rodelius, a top student at an Ivy League school who had never given much thought to God. Maybe He existed or maybe not, but there probably wasn't any real way to tell. But then one day, Tom began looking for proof and ended up finding faith. Again, you can hear that story in episode number 98 with Tom Rodelius. Today, our guest is Jerri Jameson. Jerri was a drug addict. She hated her life and wanted to stop using, but she couldn't kick the habit. Then one night, she cried out in desperation to a God she wasn't even sure existed, and He answered. So gather round, lean in, and join us for another compelling story from the kingdom of God. A few months ago, my buddy Chris Staron from the Truce podcast re-aired one of our Compelled stories. His show is all about the history of Christianity across the world and how it's played out here in America. And we had a Compelled episode about Tom Terrence, a former KKK terrorist who found Christ in a prison cell, and it tied in nicely with a series that Chris was running. So then just a few weeks after that Compelled episode played on Truce, I got an email from Jerri. She had heard that episode on Truce and then hopped over to Compelled to begin listening to other testimonies. And she was just writing to let us know that she'd been deeply encouraged by hearing all of those stories and to encourage us in our work. But then 2 minutes later, she sent a follow-up email with a one-sentence synopsis of her own testimony. It was only 17 words, but it was enough to spark my interest. And after some emails, a phone call, and a plane flight, Jerri was sitting in our studio, sharing the story of all that God had done. Her story begins in the 1960s when Jerri was just a little girl.
When I was very young, I remember my parents taking us to church. And I do remember being really little and wanting to stay in the big church with my mom especially. And so I remember a lot of fiery, loud preaching, but not understanding anything about it. I probably was 4 or 5 at that time. Then I remember being a little bit older and going to kids' church with my brother. I remember tattling on him lots of times when we'd get picked up. And my dad would, get him in trouble, and then I would feel really guilty about being such a tattletale. And that's really all I remember about church. I don't remember reading the Bible. I don't remember any conversations about Jesus other than it's just something we did as a family. We went to church. My dad has always been larger than life to me. I remember after church on Sundays, he was the fun one in the family. We'd drive around in stray neighborhoods where he knew nobody knew us. And then when people were out mowing their lawns, he'd wave and honk the horn. Just do silly things like that. And we would all laugh. My mom would laugh. All of us would. My dad was a barber when we were really little. And then he became a police officer right around the time I was age 8. And it was not too long after that, I remember coming home and my mom telling us, your dad and I are separating. Dad's moving out. And I don't remember feeling sad as much as I remember feeling confused. Like, what even does that mean? And then why? And it was really confusing to me because we never heard our parents argue. It wasn't just, I'm not going to see my dad every day. He moved to another town. And it wasn't far, far away, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. But also soon after that, he remarried. My dad, we would go see him on the weekends, every other weekend or so. He would come and pick us up, me and my brother. But none of us went to church from that point on. Things changed really dramatically and really quickly. And I don't remember praying or having a solid foundation with God. So I just kind of internalized it. I started going down a wrong path by the time I was 12. My mom started working outside the home for the first time when my parents separated. So my brother and I had time where we weren't being supervised. But for me, it was a time of confusion and it was a time of vulnerability. And I became involved with people at school, far apart from church. God was no part of it. And I never thought about God. I just didn't. And by the time I was in junior high, I was experimenting with marijuana. And when I got a little bit older, I was experimenting with other drugs as well. I started having a lot of trouble with my parents, especially my mom. I was breaking all the rules. You come home at a certain time. I wouldn't do it. You need to be sober, not do this, not do that, go to school, get good grades. I didn't do it. I did whatever I wanted to do.
She knew about your drug usage?
She knew that I was dabbling in it. She knew that I was cutting school. I was getting horrible grades. My freshman year, I think I got an F in every class except drama. So she knew there was, obviously trouble. So my sophomore year, she sent me to live with my dad in a town about 2 hours away. Now, by this time, my dad was full-on police officer. And I knew my dad was much more strict. I took him much more seriously. Even though I loved the fun side of him, my dad was the disciplinarian, and we knew that from the time we were really young and never challenged that. But by the time I was 15, when I went to live with my dad, on the surface, I got good grades. I checked all the boxes off, but behind the scenes, I was still doing whatever I wanted. And I was internalizing the problems that I was having in my life, and that was coming out as a party girl. One thing I learned along the way, and I've learned this in my lifetime, is that when you're using any kind of drugs, it's a way to numb yourself from feeling the hard feelings and asking the hard questions. You just don't want to think about it. You want to have fun. You want to figure out life on a different set of terms. And I was never a person that would go and ask my parents, why is this happening? Nor would I go to God. I really just didn't feel like I had that foundation. I figured things out for myself as much as I could, and that involved drinking, marijuana, and doing other drugs.
Eventually, Jerri moved back in with her mom, but now that she was in high school, the parties became even crazier and things went downhill even faster.
I got a job, a little part-time job. The woman I worked for was in her 20s. I got involved with her and her husband. She was partying. And so I was still not coming home and doing the things that my mom asked me to do. I moved out for a while and moved in with this couple. I saw drug use at its worst, at its rawest, in the short time that I stayed in their house. And while I was still using drugs at that time, I made a promise to myself after watching this woman's husband shoot up heroin one night. I saw him sit there like a normal person 1 minute, and within a matter of a few minutes after shooting up heroin, he was like a zombie. And it was scary to me. So I told myself then, no matter what happens, I'm not going there. I might try everything else, but never there, meaning heroin and needles. And I didn't stay there very long because it was a real scary atmosphere, people coming and going. I went back to my mom's house and I had a conversation with my mom. I was almost 17 or just turned 17 at that time. I knew that I needed to find something productive to do. And I had a stepsister, and she had joined the Army, and she was in Germany and, she was doing all this cool stuff. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I'm going to join the Army. I want to go see the world. So I went down to the recruiting place. And when they looked at my high school transcripts, the guy says, oh, no. You got a long way to go before you can join the Army. You're 17. You didn't pass your freshman year. You're not passing your junior year. The only thing you've got to show for 3.5 years in high school is your sophomore year. You've got to get a high school diploma. So, that was going to take more time than I wanted to give to it. So I went next door to the Navy recruiting office, and they said, well, you know what? If you can pass the California High School Proficiency Test, we'll take you, as long as your mom signs for you. So I took the test and I passed it. I always make this joke that my mom said good luck, and she meant that to the Navy, not to me. That was my first time on an airplane. I got on an airplane and flew from Fresno, California to Orlando, where I went to boot camp.
Over the next few months, the Navy brought some much-needed discipline into her life, yet also a lot of change. Jerri was stationed at a small base in Virginia Beach when she began dating a fellow sailor and became pregnant. They got married 6 months later and relocated to Florida, where her husband's unit was based. Jerri received an early discharge from the Navy so that she could care for their baby, and 2 days after their daughter was born, her husband deployed for 7 months to the other side of the world. Jerri was 19, a brand new mom, and terribly lonely. And unfortunately, she started doing what she had always done before.
What happened was when I went to work in retail, that is when I started meeting other people, and young people were drinking and smoking marijuana, and I engaged in that. Problems started a night when some of my friends that I worked in retail invited me out. I remember asking my husband, or basically telling him I want to go out with some friends tonight. And he was kind of taken aback. What do you mean? But I asked him, and I wanted to go with some female friends. And I did. And it really drove a bigger wedge between us. And for me, that was my first time being old enough to be in a bar. And I thought, wow, these people are out having a good time. They're dancing and drinking and having fun. I missed all of this. I went straight from high school to the Navy to marriage and motherhood. And I missed all of this. And it seemed really, really appealing to me. And I wanted to do it more. And it was not very long after that our marriage ended, because I chose that path. I want to be able to do this more. I want more freedom. I want to go out with my friends. I'm working now. I can pay a few of my own bills. And looking back now, I can see how I must have hurt him. And I do have regrets about that. And that was the path I chose. And it turned out to be a very reckless one, because I left retail and I went to work in the bar industry, where you get tips every night, you make a lot more money. And that was the first time I was ever introduced to cocaine. And that opened a door for me that was really hard to come back from. This was the 80s, the mid-80s. Cocaine was very popular. So I was out using cocaine, and you use alcohol to come down. Cocaine makes you go so fast and your heart beat fast and everything is kind of rushing at you. And then I used alcohol to come down off of that. Early in my addiction, I thought, I am totally in control. I have a job, I pay my bills, I take care of my life and my business and my kid. Everything is fine. I'm just having the fun I didn't have when I was a young woman, because I got married so young. So that was the kind of the story that I told myself, and that's how I got involved. And once you try one thing, especially if you're under the influence of anything at all, the next thing that comes along seems, give it a shot. That's not so bad. You just aren't thinking clearly. One time I was in the bathroom at a nightclub, and I think I was working that night. We all drank and used. All of us that used, we used on the job. We all drank on the job. And we were in a bathroom stall, me and a girlfriend of mine, and we dropped the powder on the floor, a dirty floor, and there's no way we were going to let it go to waste. So we just swept it right back up on the paper and ingested it into our bodies. I thought at that moment, okay, this is disgusting. I would never have thought I would stoop this low. I mean, even if you want to get high, flush this one and get something that's at least clean. But I didn't. I lived in a little apartment with a roommate and my 4-year-old, shared custody with my ex-husband. And Saturday night was the night, everybody in that business worked. And after work, we all drank and did drugs. So Sunday mornings was a day you always slept in. And I lived in this little apartment where I would try to sleep in on Sunday mornings. And there was a little church behind where my apartment was on the next block. And I would hear them celebrating, singing and just celebrating. That would be the word I would use. I would be hungover and miserable. And I would think, what in the world could a whole group of people be so happy about at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning? I just don't get it. But I would think in my mind sometimes, I would think, you know what? Someday I'm going to find out. Someday I would like to find out what they are so happy about over there.
Jerri never made it over to the church, and the following Saturday night, whenever she was offered drugs, Jerri would always accept. Month after month slipped by as she kept up this pattern. Jerri never thought of herself as an addict, but rather just a recreational user who liked to have fun with friends. But while she didn't realize it at the moment, this lifestyle would have a very heavy price to pay. More on that after the break. Welcome back to Compelled. Jerri Jameson was a young single mom battling a marijuana and cocaine addiction. By her mid-20s, she was struggling to pay her bills, so Jerri took her daughter and moved back to California, hoping for a fresh start. But the only God that Jerri served was herself, and without Christ in her life, things only got worse.
I got a job in a nightclub, and I got more and more sucked into the life of staying up late, drinking, and doing drugs. And from there, another door opened from cocaine into methamphetamine. That was something that was fairly new at the time in the late 80s. It was cheaper than cocaine, and it lasted a lot longer, the high. And so I got addicted to methamphetamine. That's when my life really tanked. I smoked marijuana all the time before, but chemically addicted to where I had to have it to get out of bed and function, yes, that was methamphetamine. And I became more and more irresponsible as a mom. So by the time my daughter was 7 and 8, I was having a hard time getting up and getting her to school. I was having a hard time doing the parental things that you're supposed to do. Get your kid up, feed them breakfast, get them dressed, make sure their hair is combed and clean, they have a decent outfit on, get them to school on time, make sure they come home and do their homework, walk them to the bus stop, all of those things that a sober adult parent would learn very quickly and do very diligently, I was not able to do diligently because I was either asleep or I was burnt out from days of being awake, and I just did not have the mental capacity to consistently do those things. The second time when I really, really felt like ashamed, knowing I had a serious problem, and I was in the bathroom, locked in the bathroom, and I smoked methamphetamine on a piece of tinfoil. And Heather was outside the bathroom door, knocking on the bathroom door saying, "Mom, are you okay? It smells like something's burning in there. Are you okay?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I'm fine." I turned the bathroom fan on and I tried to mask the smell, but my heart just sunk. I felt like, what a failure I am as a mother that I could do this. She's right on the other side of the door. That was a low point. But at that low point, I was willing to just keep using, keep masking, and keep covering it up. I didn't want to live like that. I just didn't know how to not. My ex-husband called me from Florida one day and said, look, school's been calling all year this year. What's going on there? And finally he said, I'm coming to get our daughter.
Did you tell him what was going on?
No, I did not tell him. I didn't tell him. I just said, I've had to work late a lot and you know how it is, blah, blah, blah. He's like, I'm getting a plane ticket, getting on a plane. I'll be out there within the next few days. So get her ready. And when he did show up on my doorstep and I opened the door, he said, I'm shocked at your appearance. You're very, very thin. I've never seen you this thin. What's going on? And I just sloughed it off. I think he knew, you know. But I will say, the day that he took our daughter and flew back to Florida, I remember just crawling in bed and just crying, just bawling, feeling sad for what I'd lost, feeling sad for my daughter because I know this wasn't what she wanted. She was used to her mom, and feeling ashamed and out of control. But when you're a drug addict and you feel those feelings, you run back to the drugs and you run back to the alcohol because that's the only way you can make those feelings go away. And so at that point in my life, I got deeper into my addiction. You know, there are times where occasionally I would have a fleeting thought, God, are you real? I don't know. Maybe you are, maybe you're not. I don't know. I don't really care. It doesn't pertain to me. But I would have that fleeting thought from time to time. But no, I never, ever thought about God. In fact, if people talked about, especially Jesus, you know, when you're in the bar business, I mean, that's just laughable, you know. I mean, isn't he the guy that doesn't like you to have any fun? I mean, we never talked about it, not in my circle of friends. I ended up meeting a man at wasn't even a party. At this point, I was so dark in my addiction, I didn't go to parties. I went to places where I could get high. And I was at a house buying drugs and getting high when I met this man. And the minute I met him and saw him, I thought, that's someone I would never go out with. And yet we ended up, because of both of us having this addiction, we attracted each other, you know, that toxic codependency. We ended up getting together and he ended up moving in with me. And I learned very early on that he was a heroin addict. My heart just sunk because I went quickly back to that time when I was 16 and a half years old, staying in that house with those young adult people and seeing that woman's husband use heroin. And I remember so clearly telling myself, I will never do that. I will never cross that line. And I hadn't. But to see somebody else do that in front of me again, that was the first time I'd seen somebody shoot up heroin since that time. And it impacted me greatly. It scared me. And I thought, this is not something I want to be involved with. No, no, no. And yet, I stayed involved with him. He was a creative person. He was a smart person, a hardworking person. He had a lot of qualities that I admired. But there comes a time, and I think most drug addicts would probably agree with me on this. There comes a time when you're a drug addict and you've been in it for a while where it's not fun anymore. And you start to tell yourself, you know what? I got to get out of this. I don't want to do this anymore. And the problem is you can't just get out of it. You can't just will yourself into saying, I'm not going to use anymore. You can have the best of intentions. You can wake up every day, which at this point I did. Me and this man, as our lives became more and more desperate, I would wake up every day and think, that's it for me. I'm not going to end up like this. I want better than this. I'm going to stop this. I don't want this. But as soon as I was offered drugs, I would go right back. Or as soon as I came to that point physiologically where I hadn't had any for a little while, the cravings, you know, it would just suck me right back in. Now, meanwhile, my daughter, who was living in Florida with her dad, I still would see her summers and Christmas, but not year-round. I still was carrying a lot of shame and guilt about how that was. And I just got to a point where I just desperately wanted something normal. I would think to myself sometimes, this isn't how the rest of the world lives. Why am I living like this?
Jerri was now 34, and what had started as a way to have fun when she was a teenager now consumed her life. And she finally recognized what she had denied for so long but had always known deep down inside. She was a drug addict. Jerri had been living with her boyfriend, the heroin user, for 3 years now, and while he was content with their lifestyle, Jerri was desperate to be free of her addiction. But there was no hope in sight until one night in January of 1996.
So one night when my boyfriend was gone, it was probably 2:00 in the morning. I was in our apartment alone by myself. And I was just lying on the floor, face down in the living room in the dark. I was sad because I was in this position where I felt so vulnerable, where I felt like so out of control, like my life was just so out of control and I couldn't stop it. I just started crying, just bawling, crying. And as I lay there, face down on the floor, I felt a palpable presence come into the room. And the way I describe it as is when my oldest daughter, when she was little, if I'd be taking a nap or whatever, I'd fall asleep watching TV and she'd come up and stand there. And it's like, your kid's right there watching you. You can feel another body close and you open your eyes and there she is. It was that kind of feeling. Like if I open my eyes right now, there's someone in this room with me. And I couldn't shake it. So I lifted my head off the floor and I said, God, if you're real, I think you are in this room with me. And if you are, I need your help. And if you don't help me, I think I might die. And then I put my head down and fell asleep. And I woke up the next day. I have never done drugs, nor have I desired to do drugs of any kind since that moment. I don't know why God chose that way to deliver me. I didn't go to rehab. I wasn't involved in any faith-based support group. I had to go through the physical withdrawals of not having methamphetamine for about 2 weeks. My boyfriend came back home. He offered me drugs because we always did drugs. He did heroin, I did methamphetamine. We always. And I said, no, I don't want that anymore. I'm done. I don't want it. I didn't tell him what happened in the room that night because I wasn't sure what happened. I just said, I don't want that anymore. I went from not being able to do without drugs. I immediately had a healthy fear of being exposed to them again. And so I was offered drugs on a mirror. I immediately took it and threw it in the toilet and flushed it down the toilet. I slept a lot. I ate a lot for about 2 weeks. I continued to work through all of this. And about 2 weeks into it, I started having a clear mind. And then I started asking questions. Okay, God, what's up? Are you real? Did you do this for me? Were you there in this room with me the other night? How is this happening? And I would ask myself and God those questions, just very curious. My boyfriend at the time was saying, you'll be back. They always come back. I'm happy for you, but you'll be back. And you know what? I believed him. I never said anything to him, but in my mind, I'm thinking, no, if I don't do something really drastic, I probably will go back because I've known this for so long. At this point, it had been almost 13 years. So I kept thinking, I have to do whatever it takes to maintain my sobriety. And it's going to take getting this relationship out of my life. This is not going to work. I've never been to any therapy or anything, but I'm smart enough to figure out if one person's using and one person's not, it's not going to work. Somebody's going to either stop or start again. And so I started thinking, how can I get out of this relationship? I'm not a confrontational person. I'm a person that can kind of very easily find myself, get along. And I wanted to help this man. He was a nice man. He was a human being. We had shared 3 years together. I didn't want to just desert him, but I knew that if we stayed together, I was probably going to go back into using. And so while I was trying to figure that part out, I ended up getting pregnant.
Becoming pregnant was a total surprise, and Jerri was immediately concerned about the world that she was going to bring her baby into. And her concern eventually devolved into all-consuming worry. So once again, in desperation, Jerri cried out to God for help, and he answered. Coming up after the break. Welcome back to Compelled. For almost 2 decades, Jerri Jameson had struggled with alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, and meth. But after a desperate prayer to God, she had been miraculously delivered of her addictions. Now, although she had cried out to God in her distress, Jerri had no further understanding about who God was or his son Jesus. But that was about to change when just a few months later, she found herself pregnant with a child of her heroin-addicted boyfriend.
So I thought, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do. I do not know what to do. So I said, okay, I guess I'm having a baby. 16 years after I had my baby, I'm having another baby. Big, big gap in time. At that point, I had been sober for probably 7 months. And so here I am with my belly growing. Boy, I really started talking to God then. I started asking questions throughout the day. Okay, God, what is happening in my life right now? What am I going to do? How am I going to be a mom? I wasn't very good at it the first time. What am I going to do? And I decided I needed to know more about God. So where do you learn about God? Got to go to church. I guess I remembered that from the time I was really, really little. And there was a little Calvary chapel right down the street from me. So I started driving through the parking lot late at night when I'd get off work. I was still bartending, pregnant, sober. Late at night, I'd get off work, 2 o'clock in the morning, I'd drive through the parking lot because I know there would be no pastors coming out to say, hey, come on in, So I'd drive through the parking lot and look at the service times. And I'd make a mental note, this Sunday, my day, I'm going. But Sunday would roll around and I would never go. I always felt such fear, for one, of the unknown. But a big part of it was just the shame. I thought, people like me don't go to church. Those people in there are good people. They're holy people. I'm the opposite. I don't belong there. So I wouldn't go. And then the next week I'd drive through the parking lot again, 2 o'clock in the morning, look at the service times. I wouldn't go on Sunday. And at this point, I think I was 6 months pregnant. And there was a knock on the door at my apartment one day. And I opened the door, and it was 3 people from that church. And they said, hi, we are from Calvary Chapel. We just wanted you to know God loves you so much. And we would love for you to come and visit our church this Sunday. And they gave me a little card. I was stunned. What they didn't know is I had been asking God for months, like, God, are you real? God, I'm thinking about going to this church. I don't know what to do. And when I opened the door and they shared that with me and they put that little card in my hand and I said, okay, thank you, and shut the door quickly. But I turned around with my back to the door and I looked up to the heavens and I said, God, you are real. You sent them here to talk to me. And it was so important to me that they told me how much God loved me, because that was hard for me to believe after the things I had done. How could they possibly have known that I had driven through that church parking lot at 2 o'clock in the morning numerous times saying, I'm going to go, but I needed, and God knew I needed that little nudge. And I got it. And they provided that because they listened to the Holy Spirit and they walked up those stairs to my door and knocked on the door. And I could tell you that was a dark door. It was a dark place. There was still a lot of stuff going on in that apartment that probably felt really weird to a Holy Spirit-filled group of believers. But they did it. I don't remember what they look like. I do not. And I hope someday to meet them in heaven and just be able to say, thank you. Thank you for listening to God. It saved my life.
Jerri needed no further sign. God was gently calling her, and she was ready to respond.
So I went to church that Sunday, and I remember walking across the threshold of that church. You know, the foyer, everybody's got their hand out to shake your hand. I felt so overwhelmed and scared to death. But the minute I walked into the sanctuary, all I felt was just this flood of emotion, love. I don't remember what the preacher preached about. I don't remember a single song that the worship person sang. I just remember crying through the whole thing. I cried through the worship service. I remember vividly after worship was over when someone says, turn around and greet your neighbor. I vividly remember a woman turning around and hugging me, just embracing me, saying, I'm so glad you're here. God loves you so much. And I was surprised by God's goodness. I thought I would feel judged in the presence of so many church people. I didn't. I felt loved. I felt embraced. God knew I needed it. I just needed it. That's what I remembered the most distinctly about that first experience was just the overwhelming feeling of love and that woman just embracing me. And when she said, God loves you so much, I believed her, and I'm glad I did. And I went home and I told my boyfriend, you gotta come. This is a game changer. You just gotta come. God is real. He's real. He helped me. He helped me get sober. And now we have this baby. We knew it was going to be a girl because I had had genetic testing because they were afraid because of my history of drug abuse and my age. I was almost 35. They wanted to know, what we were going to be dealing with. And I'm like, you just got to come. I'm sober. God is real. He loves me. Let's go. Let's do this. We're going to be parents together. And he did go with me twice, but he told me, I believe in Jesus. I believe the Bible. I believe in God. But he said, I can't do it. I've been a heroin addict my whole life. I've tried to quit before and it's just too strong for me. I can't do it. So at that point, and I was like 6 or 7 months pregnant, I was going faithfully to that little church. I was listening to Greg Laurie on the radio every day. And every time he would end his message with an invitation to accept Christ as your Savior, I would pray the prayer again. I would just be like, God, I just want to know for sure that I am in. And I want you to know I'm serious about this. And so I would pray that prayer over and over again. I was not working anymore. I was getting unemployment. And then I was really seriously thinking like, okay, what are my next steps? I can't bring this baby into a house with a heroin addict. It was obvious that, he was still using, and I knew he was, and he knew I knew. I don't really have enough money to move out on my own. I don't know where I would go, even if I did. I had tried once just for like a night, and he came and found me and begged me to come back. And I did come back, and I wanted to help him. I really did. My dream, my absolute desire was for him to get delivered from drugs like I did, start following Jesus, and we could have our baby and get married, have the family that I had messed up on the first time around. I really wanted that so badly. But I could tell as I was getting further along in my pregnancy that it just wasn't going to happen, and I had to make some hard decisions. When I was 8 months pregnant, I called my dad and I said, Dad, I said, the truth of the matter is things are not going well here. My boyfriend is addicted to drugs, heroin. Now, my dad has a background in law enforcement, so he knows the darkest side of the criminal element. I said, I'm scared to death to bring this baby into this environment, but I don't know where to go. And when I told him all of that, my dad said, okay, here's what I want you to do. Nothing. Act normal. Go on with your day. I'm packing up the car right now. I'm leaving. I'll be there in 6 hours. When I get there, come on down. Tell your boyfriend, hey, my dad's in town. He just called me from the diner or whatever. He's in town working on a case, and we're just going to go out to dinner. So that's what I did. And that's the last time I ever went back to that apartment. It's the last time I ever saw my boyfriend. My dad took me away. I had my baby the next month. And I was scared, I can tell you. When I sat there at my dad's house holding my 6-week-old infant in my room, I remember crying and crying, saying, God, what will our lives be like? She'll never know her father. How is this going to work out? I knew at that point that somehow it would, but it broke my heart.
But as time passed, the Lord did work things out. The same God who was able to miraculously deliver Jerri from her drug addictions overnight was also able to shape and redeem every trial for her good. Over the years, Jerri faithfully attended her church and grew in her walk with the Lord, all the while raising her second daughter, Haley, as a single mom. Jerri eventually enrolled in college, graduated, and became a high school English teacher, and she also volunteered in her church's kids and women's ministries, and eventually remarried, this time to a faithful man of the Lord. In every way possible, her new life was the complete opposite of what she had left behind.
Life was so different out of the old relationship, sober, a mom, a student, then a teacher. It was always coming home and knowing what to expect, having peace, having joy, having stability, having the joy of being a mom again. And I've sat down with my daughter, my oldest daughter, on more than one occasion and asked her forgiveness. I've been so fortunate that my oldest daughter moved back to our area with her daughter, and she lives 2 miles from me, and she works in the family business. We are in each other's lives on a daily basis. She's rooting me on. She knows I'm here today, but I was able to ask her forgiveness and get it. And I have 2 amazing stepkids that are adults, and I have the absolute delight of being a grandma to their children. So God has just, since I accepted the Lord and started walking with Him, I can say that every single thing in my life is so different than the way it was before, than the path that I was on before. It was just such a beautiful gift. And something happened during COVID that God used to just shine a light on that time period in my life of darkness. I was digging through a box of old papers. I'm a writer, so I'll write on this or I'll write on that, and then I tuck it away. I might find it again someday and I might not. But I found this old binder, this tattered binder of poems that I wrote when I was addicted to methamphetamine and working in the bar business. And they were the saddest, oh my goodness, just very hopeless, dark, sad, depressed. I was in such a hard and dark place. A part of me knew it, but again, as an addict, you go back to numbing the pain. You just get high again, and then you don't have to think about it. And I found them right near my sober anniversary. It was like the same week, which is coming up. January 24th is my 29th sober anniversary. But I found them, and as I was holding them and reading through them, I just was amazed at how God works. That the God that you didn't know, you didn't acknowledge, you didn't care about or wonder about, had a plan for you even in your darkest, darkest time. And what a difference. I could have never imagined as that woman in that place that I would ever even believe in God, let alone be born again, follower of Jesus Christ. God changed everything. God is a God of second, third, fourth chances, but for me, it's so significant that I got to be a mom again, a sober mom. I got to be at every color guard, flag-waving competition, parade, school assembly, oral language. I was there. I was there for all of it, which has it's just been so wonderful to me. And a second chance at being a wife. I've had such a wonderful experience being in a Christian marriage, where we're always striving, even in our flawed humanness, to reach for God and find Him in the things that we're doing in our lives. I've gotten a second chance at some pretty incredible things, and I'm very, very grateful.
As Jerri wrapped up her story, she took one last moment to reflect on the ways that God had protected her despite her worst efforts.
We do have free will, and I used mine to make some pretty poor decisions. I can look back now and think of the times that God had to have been there, or else I would have been dead. I think of all the times I drove under the influence. God could have taken His hands off the situation then. Game over. I think of all the times that I made poor decisions to be with people that I should not have been alone with. Horrible things could have happened. He could have taken His hands off of me there. I look back and marvel, really, and my husband and I talk about this a lot, both of us, that in all of the times when I was so determined to do things my own way and to define what was right and good for me by my own standards, that God in His mercy was still there, or else I'd be dead or in prison. I'm absolutely sure of that. So why did I have to go through all that? I don't know. I wish I could have gone the easy way. I wish I could be a person who always had a relationship with God and never strayed from the right path. But besides God, there is a person of darkness. There is the devil. There is the enemy of our souls. And he's there waiting for the opportune times. And I just didn't have the spiritual education to know the difference. But when I wanted to and when I needed God the most, He was there. And I've spent the last almost 30 years now learning to follow God, discern His voice, discern the voice of the enemy, and know how to stay out of those situations.
Well, Jerri, thanks for sharing your story of what God did. And He is the God of second chances. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
When I listen to Jerri's story, I cannot stop but think of how God truly is the God of second chances. Jerri did nothing to earn it or deserve it. She wasn't some stellar PTA Mom of the Year or community saint or upstanding model citizen. She was the opposite of all those things, a drug-addicted bartender looking for her next fix of weed, cocaine, or meth. And there was no long, extended search for God. She wasn't even sure if God was real. But in her moment of desperation, she cried out to Him, and He answered. Recently I was reminded of the story of King Manasseh from the Old Testament in 2 Chronicles chapter 33. He was one of the most wicked kings of Judah and led the nation of Israel into all kinds of idolatry and magic and even human sacrifice. In fact, the Bible says that he filled Jerusalem from one end to another with innocent blood. But the Bible also tells us that eventually God brought judgment on Manasseh, and he was enslaved and brought to Babylon in chains. And there he humbled himself and repented and cried out to God in desperation, and God answered and gave him a second chance. And this time Manasseh was a totally different person. He returned to the throne of Judah and tore down the idols and altars that he had set up, and he led the nation of Judah in repenting to the Lord their God. And in so many ways, that too is Jerri's story. The God of heaven entering an impossible situation and giving a second chance. And no matter how hopeless your situation may be today, whether it's you personally or a parent or a child or a friend. Jerri's story reminds us that the God of second chances is waiting to intervene. No one is too far gone. And if you know someone who would be blessed by Jerri's testimony, please send this to them. It's episode number 99 with Jerri Jameson. All right, here's our big pieces of news. Number one, first off, Compelled is on the road, and we'd love to meet you. This week, May 26th through the 30th, I'm in Columbus, Ohio for the Christian Missionary Alliance Council meeting. I've got a booth in the exhibit hall where I'm telling people about Compelled. And if you're around, then come by and say hello. I'd love to meet you. Then next week, June 5th through 7th, I'll be at the Texas Homeschool Convention near Houston, Texas. Sarah and our 4 kids will be with me as well, and I'll actually be the MC. So you'll see me on stage throwing t-shirts and cracking jokes. If you're around, come and say hi. And finally, from September 1st through 3rd, Sarah and I will be at the Getty Sing Conference in Nashville, Tennessee. We'll just be attending the conference, so there's no Compelled booth or anything, but we'd love to connect and say hi. Shoot us a message and we'll find a time. You can find those 3 events listed on our website at compelledpodcast.com/events. Okay, that's our first piece of news. Here's our second piece of news. In 2 weeks from now, we are going to release episode number 100. And to celebrate, we are creating a special behind-the-scenes episode with you, our Compelled listeners. We want to hear your stories about how God has used the Compelled podcast to encourage you in your walk with Him. Just record a short 2-minute story on your cell phone and then submit it at compelledpodcast.com/celebration by this Saturday, June 7th. I can't promise that we'll use all the stories that are submitted, but you never know. The recording can either be a video on your cell phone or just an audio recording on your cell phone, totally up to you. We just want to keep this real simple. Just record your story and then send it to us at compelledpodcast.com/celebration. All right, here's the final piece of big news. And I've been teasing our top secret project for the last 6 months now. And we've told everyone on our Compelled Insider email list. But if you're not on the email list, well, now you finally get to learn it, okay? It's finally time for all of our audio listeners to hear the news. After countless late nights and long weekends and blood and sweat and tears, this summer on July 7th, 2025, Compelled is launching our very first book of Christian testimonies. And it's appropriately called Compelled. These are 7 of our favorite stories from the podcast retold for the written word. Each story has the same drama and excitement as what actually happened, and we transport you into the story of what God did in each miraculous situation. You can stand in the courtroom with Hannah Overton as a judge pronounces her guilty of a murder she didn't commit and sentences Hannah to life in prison. But then in prison, you'll encounter the same God that Hannah did, who told her to forgive her accusers. You'll also paddle deep into the jungles of New Guinea alongside Don and Carol Richardson as they make first contact with a Stone Age tribe of cannibals lost to time who are in desperate need of a savior. And you'll feel the heat of the Pentagon in flames on September 11th as Army Officer Brian Birdwell is flung like a rag doll by a Boeing 757, slamming into the building and exploding in a ball of fire. You'll feel Brian's life hang by a thread as the God of miracles works mightily that day. All of these stories and more were written by my wife, Sarah, myself, and our co-author, Ellie Payne, who's another fan of the podcast, and these stories are truly a labor of love. This book is a great tool for evangelism, and if you have a skeptical coworker or friend, you can give them a copy and just tell them, like, hey, here's this book full of modern-day miracles. These people are still alive. They're ordinary people who claim they saw God do incredible things. Read it for yourself. The book is super accessible. There are 7 stories across 7 chapters, and there's no complicated theological words. It's a book of true stories that reads like a page-turning novel. And I'm actually going to peel back the curtain a little more than maybe I should. We wrote these stories as a gift to you, our listeners. And because of that, early on in the writing process, Sarah and I went to our publisher, 10 of those, and we told them that, hey, we don't actually want to make any money off of the book sales. We would like to waive our entire royalty. But in return, what can you as the publisher do for our audience so that they can buy this book in bulk and give it away as an evangelistic tool? And our publisher, 10 of those, was very receptive to that. So here's what they've agreed to do. From right now through the end of July, every time one of our Compelled listeners buys our book with the special promo code COMPELLED, you'll get an extra copy mailed to you for free for you to give away. I've already given a copy to the contractor working on our house and another copy to our mold inspector, who then told me he loves reading and was headed to Half Price Bookstore that week to stock up on new books. Test readers have already told us that these stories have left them in tears over the goodness of God. And for the unbelievers in your life, our prayer is that these stories would be a powerful introduction to the mighty God that we serve. Okay, so you can get an extra copy of the book just using the promo code COMPELLED. But wait, that's not all. We asked our publisher again, we said, hey, how deep can they slash costs? Because, a BOGO, buy one, get one, that's already amazing. That's already a 50% discount, right? But and did I mention that they only charge $1 for shipping, right? So that's regardless if you buy one copy or 20 copies, $1 for shipping regardless of how many copies you order, okay? But here's the other crazy thing. We said, hey, what if we have some huge Compelled fans that are always telling their friends about the testimonies on Compelled, but their friends just aren't into podcasts, right? Maybe they read books, but they don't listen to podcasts. Or what if one of our listeners wants to give a Compelled book to everyone in their church small group, or their Bible study fellowship, or to the moms in their homeschool co-op, or what if they want to keep a copy by their front door for their postman and their Amazon delivery drivers? Or what if they own a small business and have a rack of free evangelistic tracts for their customers, but would also like to add the Compelled book too? What can we do for those people? And once again, our publisher came back with an amazing response. And by the way, our publisher is so cool. In fact, the way that we got connected is kind of a miracle, which I'm going to have to tell you that story a later time. But they're called 10 of those because their philosophy is that if a Christian book is really great and points people to a deeper walk with Jesus, then let's get 10 more of those to give to friends. And let's not let cost or expense be a hindrance to sharing the name of Jesus even further. They are really the ideal publishing partner for Compelled. Okay, anyways, we went to them and said, hey, what can we do for our listeners who might want to give away a lot of copies? Or maybe they're, organizing a Christian retreat, or they're a pastor with a congregation who needs to hear these stories. And our publisher came back and they said, and okay, this is kind of crazy, but they said, if someone wants to buy a case of 100 copies, which really isn't that crazy if you start thinking about giving away copies to your Amazon drivers and small groups and coworkers and Mother's Day out friends. But they said, hey, okay, if someone wants to buy 100 copies of the Compelled book, then they can buy them for $2.50 each, right? And that's a crazy price, okay? That's just crazy. And so that is a steep discount. And basically in my universe, that's unheard of. And again, I'm not making any money off of any of these books, right? I'm not taking a profit. I'm not getting a cut of the sale. Sarah isn't getting it. Compelled's not. We're not seeing any of the money of this, right? So I literally have no financial incentive to encourage you to buy this book, okay? I'm not making money off of this. They are not paying me to say this. They're not an advertiser with this, right? I'm literally doing this because these are stories about God that need to be heard by everyone. And Sarah and I just thought, hey, this is a really cool way for us to really make these books affordable. And so I'm going to do some super fast math for you. If you were going to buy 25 copies using that BOGO for each book, right? So you would actually have to go through 25 different orders, ordering one book at a time. So you get what I'm saying, right? You get 50 copies, right? But it would actually be cheaper by almost $100 to just go ahead and order the 100 copies at $2.50 each. So if you want to get a copy just for yourself and another to give away to one friend, then use the BOGO code, right? Compelled, all caps, before the end of July. But if you want to use the book as an evangelistic resource for your neighbors and to give to your church community group and your parents, your homeschool co-op and your postman and more, then I strongly recommend that you buy a case of 100 for the crazy discounted price of $2.50 each, right? There's no special code. You just start ordering on their website and you'll see the special pricing automatically apply. And by the way, this would be a great Christmas gift also, right? Like if you have this big family gathering and you just want to give away a copy to this would be great for that, okay? And I actually don't know how long they're going to do the special for the 100 books. That I do not know. They didn't tell me that, okay? But I've got a tip for you, one last tip that I just learned last week. So the book officially says that it doesn't come out until July 7th. So this is technically a pre-order, but I just learned from the publisher that they will actually start mailing out the books as soon as they arrive in the U.S. warehouse, which I think happened earlier today, actually. So just head over to compelledpodcast.com/book for all the details on the promo code and to place your order. Okay, and then last thing, okay? If you want to be a part of our launch team for the book, and that means you're a Compelled mega fan, you love the stories on Compelled, your soul is encouraged, you're getting the book to give to your friends, but you also want to do more to help these stories reach others, then join our book launch team. As part of our book launch team, you'll get an e-version of the book immediately and can start reading it on your Kindle or tablet or whatever your preferred device is. We'll be asking you to post a book review online and to post about the book on social media on the day of the launch. But then you'll be invited to a special video call with me and Sarah and the rest of the launch team to talk about the book, how we selected the stories, the writing process, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. To join the book launch team, head over to compelledpodcast.com/book and fill out the form there. Wow, okay, we have covered a lot of ground and you have been very patient. So to reiterate, come meet us in person this summer. Details at compelledpodcast.com/events. Tell us how Compelled has blessed you, and you might make a surprise appearance in our episode 100 celebration. Send us your recording at compelledpodcast.com/celebration. And help us spread the word about the brand new Compelled book and buy a copy for yourself and a friend, or maybe 100 friends or 100 witnessing opportunities. All the details and the promo code is at compelledpodcast.com/book. Okay, that's it for now. Special thanks to my buddy Gabriel Affont, who helped me film Jerri's testimony. Gabriel and his wife Rachel own Keylight Marketing, which helps mid-sized companies just like Compelled craft an online presence that they're proud of. They specialize in content creation, social media, photography, video production. Also, they just had their first baby a few days ago. So maybe pray that God would give them an extra dose of grace and sleep. They've been a blessing to Compelled, and they'd love to bless you as well. If you have marketing needs, then visit them at keylightmarketing.com. Today's episode was edited by Will Jackson, mixing and mastering by Sonomorphic, and our associate producer is my delightful wife, Sarah Hastings. I'm your host, Paul Hastings, and you've been listening to Compelled. We'll be back next time with our season finale, episode 100. In the meantime, go grab a copy of the book. We'll see you then.